Tonight, growing tensions as the White House grapples with the challenge of how and when to reopen the country.
The President of the United States calls the shots.
Governors look to band together to bring their states back to life. Plus, the latest on coronavirus testing, possible treatment, and the next steps in trying to contain the outbreak. And
we're the people who are here to help the people of Israel.
How Israel's defense forces are now on the front lines of the battle against COVID-19. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. The White House unveils a new task force focused on reopening America. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup. When and how to get the country up and running again. That'll be the focus of a second coronavirus task force. CBN White House correspondent Ben Kennedy joins us from the North Lawn. Ben, this clearly is a top priority for the president.
Yeah, John, no doubt you're right. This new group's main priority is the economy, which you were just talking about, which is weighing heavily on both the American public and the president himself. He calls it the biggest decision he's ever had to make, when and how to reopen the country. This becoming the latest battle to take center stage in the West Wing. President Trump hoping to roll back restrictions by May.
The President of the United States has the authority to do what the President has the authority to do, which is very powerful. The President of the United States calls the shots.
But some say that's not so clear-cut.
I think generally the power resides with the states, and my guess is the court would bend in that direction also. It's difficult to imagine the necessity of a national policy when it comes to reopening the economy, for example.
Several states from New York to California are already talking about ways to take the next step. Steve, you're talking about different states, different businesses. Right. Bottom line, what needs to be done to reopen the economy?
Well, the president's going to need to issue an executive order saying that certain states can open, but ultimately the logistics of this will be decided by the nation's governors.
President Trump making one move with an economic task force he's calling the Opening Our Country Council. He plans to take a leading role alongside new Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, who will play a supporting role. The White House has assembled an expert panel of doctors and business leaders to join the task force. Trump predicts once doors are open again, the economy will take off like a rocket. Observers warn some workers and even consumers will be hesitant to return to life as it was.
I think if the government can focus on consumer confidence with the underlying principle for communications being truth, then I think demand will start to come back because ultimately this economic issue is a demand issue. It's not a supply issue, and demand is going to be a function of how well consumer confidence rebounds from what's obviously a significant decline from cyclical highs.
How long do you think it'll take before we're basically back to normal?
When are we going to get back to normal? That is the question that all of us want an answer to. It's not going to be like an ignition switch of a car that we can just reopen the economy and everybody's going to get back to work. I wish that were the case. It's going to take, in my opinion, about 3 or 4 months before we have the end of this recession, and it's going to be a slow recovery.
Now, the CDC says the first step to reopening is widespread testing, which is not yet available. It'll also likely be a year before a coronavirus vaccine, that is available. John?
All right, CBN White House correspondent Ben Kennedy. Thanks, Ben. Well, joining me now is David Brody, CBN chief political analyst. David, the criticism surrounding the Reopening America Council for the Economy is that it's made up solely of White House staff. How much more public confidence would it instill if it included outside industry and medical experts?
Well, John, I think the White House is going to get dinged for this, the fact that there are no public health or economic experts from the outside world, from the business world. Having said that, let's also remember how this administration operates, right? You have Steve Mnuchin, you obviously Trump leading the whole thing, if you will, but Mnuchin and Jared Kushner and Mark Meadows and all these folks who all have major contacts to, quote, the outside world, the industry world, the economic expert world. And so this is how they operate. In other words, they pretty much keep it internal. They bring in the experts for what they need from, whether it be on the phone or whether it's Zoom or whether, so they're going to get the information. But the perception in terms of how it looks on the outside does look a little iffy.
David, on jumpstarting the economy, the president says his authority is, quote, total. The Constitution expressly grants police powers to the states, not the federal government. Does this set up a potential constitutional fight as the country's already engaged in the fight to contain the virus?
Right. Well, let's hope this doesn't get into a constitutional fight. But clearly the contours of a constitutional fight are there, because you're right, John. I mean, the 10th Amendment specifically says that unless the Constitution outlines something for the United States government in terms of power for the government, then it's reserved for the states. I mean, this is a no-brainer. I mean, we learned this in 7th grade. So the bottom line here going forward is that Donald Trump's going to have to lay out a pretty compelling legal argument, and I'm not quite sure there is one. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure there really isn't a legal argument. I think what Donald Trump is talking about here, to put on my Donald Trump decipher code that you get in the cereal box, you know, it comes in there and you put it on. Look, this is what I think is going on. The reason he keeps saying total authority is for two reasons. One, money. He knows that the federal government controls a lot of the purse strings. So he says, look, if you want the money, you got to come through me. And I think that's a big part of it. And he also understands that the CDC guidelines and what the federal government puts out is going to dictate how a lot of these states move forward, because most Americans in the country realize that if the CDC changes the federal guidelines, then that's going to be a big game changer. Trump knows that.
All right, real quickly here, turning to election 2020, Joe Biden picked up the endorsement of former President Barack Obama. Let's take a listen and come back on the other side.
For those of us who love this country and are willing to do our part to make sure it lives up to its highest ideals, now's the time to fight for what we believe in.
David, we have about 30 seconds left. What does that endorsement mean for the Biden campaign and then Trump's response, of course?
Well, I mean, Obama is hoping that it will give Biden a lift with Bernie's folks. I mean, and Biden's going to need Bernie's folks very, very, quite a bit. And if you notice what Barack Obama did in that video endorsement is he talked a lot about Bernie, talked a lot about the middle class, talked a lot about inequality. And then he said a line that could get the Democrats and Biden into trouble. Obama said that the Biden agenda is the most progressive ever by a Democrat candidate. Yeah, that's what the Trump administration is going to, or yeah, the Trump campaign is going to say, and that could come back to hurt Biden in the general.
That definitely sounds problematic. Chief Political Analyst David Brody, thank you for your time.
Thanks, John.
Well, amid the ongoing concerns of the coronavirus, the Senate's recess is getting longer. Today, Majority Leader Mitch McConnell announced senators won't reconvene on Capitol Hill until at least May 4th. The move comes as the number of confirmed cases in the United States continues to grow. Nearly 585,000 Americans have tested positive, and almost 25,000 have died in the outbreak. And with us now is Dr. Jen Ashton, Chief Medical Correspondent for ABC News. Great to see you again. Dr. Ashton, with improving situations in hot zones like New York, Washington State, and California, are we beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel?
I don't think anyone knows the answer to that, John. The reality is that social distancing measures are effective, and when we start to see a steadying or then a decline of case rates and fatalities, which there is always a lag time for that to occur, then of course that's encouraging. But part of the dilemma is with these social distancing measures, when you see these things start to improve, you can be lulled into a false sense of security that there's some arbitrary time point that we've passed and we can just resume our daily activities. And there's pretty much general consensus that if that were to occur, the number of cases and deaths would just go right back up again.
Dr. Ashton, along those same lines, as pressure mounts to reopen the country, we're hearing more about the need for aggressive contact tracing before scaling back the prevention measures currently in place. Can you explain what that means and why it's so critical before we can get back to normal?
Sure. So when you talk about testing, there's really two arms to this process. One is to test people who have symptoms with a nasal swab. That's generally a PCR test, and hopefully that will be more widespread so people can get those results as quickly as 15 minutes. And then there's antibody testing, which is generally done with blood. And that will generally tell us who's susceptible, who's infected, and who has recovered. They serve different purposes, and we still don't know the accuracy of them and really when to test people, who to test, how often to test. We're still learning a lot about this virus. But when you talk about contact tracing, the premise of that is that because it is thought that 25 to 50% of coronavirus can be spread by people who have no symptoms at all, it's very important to be able to test huge numbers of people, including those who have no symptoms, so that if we get a positive result, that person is isolated for, let's say, a period of 2 weeks, and then they're questioned about who they've been in contact with, and those contacts are then contacted, told to quarantine, and ideally be tested as well, so that you can actually stop the transmission in the community of this virus.
So it seems more targeted. With some states, or rather some states are taking a regional approach in coordinating their efforts to reopen. I want to get your thoughts on that versus reopening the country all at once.
Well, I think, if you listen to Dr. Anthony Fauci and the nation's top epidemiologists, there is general consensus that opening the country in one fell swoop like a light switch is generally thought to be a bad idea. And we have to remember that people's lives are at stake here. So it will basically just have everything we've done in the last couple of weeks and months be for naught if we just rip the Band-Aid off and go right back to the way things were. The cases will go up again. The virus is still there, and it's powerful and it's sneaky. So I think when you talk about states or regions coordinating a response, that may be a good option. This is a complicated situation, and there are some hopefully very smart people working on it, thinking of it from a lot of different angles, but also understand that it's not just states or cities or regions that need to think about how they reopen. It's even populations within a given area. So within a city or state, let's say maybe you maintain more vigorous and aggressive social distancing measures for more vulnerable populations like the elderly, people in nursing homes, or people who are hospitalized. It might be certain areas of the country with more vulnerable populations, less access to testing, less access to health care. Maybe they get reopened more slowly or with different provisions in place. So there have to be a lot of different scenarios taken into account before a random decision is made that can affect people's lives.
All right, Dr. Jen Ashton, we're just going to have to leave it there with ABC News. Thank you for making time for us.
Thanks, John, for having me.
Coming up, fighting the pandemic, the shifting focus of Israel's military forces prioritizing citizen well-being in the middle of a medical emergency.
Hey, if you're tired and exhausted all day, you can't think clearly, and you really just need a cup or even a pot of coffee to get through your day, then join me, Dr. Josh Axe, for this new series where I'm going to teach you how to transform your diet and use essential oils and supplements to get a better night's sleep.
Wake up to your best life. Call 1-800-700-7000 to get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
It's about the competition.
I kind of put that pressure on myself, and I think people had expectations.
It's about overcoming.
We use this phrase all the time, keep chopping, keep practicing hard.
It's about going the distance.
I think as a father, it's my job, to lead. Just be the best husband and father I can be.
Watch Going the Distance with Sean Brown Saturday night at 7:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Orphans Promise is committed to loving and serving at-risk children, to helping keep families together, and to creating opportunities for strong and sustainable communities around the world. We're working in over 60 countries around the world, and with your help, we can do even more. There's an old African proverb I love that says, if you want to run fast, run alone. But if you want to run far, run together. At Orphans Promise, we want to run far so we can touch the lives of as many orphaned and vulnerable children as possible. But we don't want to go alone. We're out to change the world, one child, one family, one community at a time. Will you join us?
Welcome back. Some countries are extending their national stay-at-home orders. India's 1.3 billion population are now being told to self-quarantine until at least May 3rd. And France's President Emmanuel Macron has also announced an extension, saying his country aims to begin reopening gradually beginning May 11th. Meanwhile, 6 European countries, including hard-hit Italy and Spain, are starting to lift lockdown measures in some areas. Well, in Israel, it's not just medical workers on the front lines of the pandemic. The Israeli Defense Forces is having to think outside the box when it comes to combating coronavirus. CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell reports.
From high-tech warfare against rockets from Gaza and Hezbollah tunnels to cybersecurity and troops on the ground, the Israel Defense Forces is cutting edge. Now, due to COVID-19, the IDF has expanded its mission.
A key part of the national situation is to provide information. So there are call centers that have been manned by IDF personnel together with Magen David Adom and with the Ministry of Health and other officials.
Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conrica says while it's early in the process, the IDF is rolling with the changes.
It's really an overall effort with different parts of the IDF, the logistic teams, the medical corps, and even technological units that are providing novel adaptations to existing technologies. For instance, adapting different ventilators to hospital use.
And there's more.
Another effort that we are part of, again through the Homefront Command, which is part of the IDF, is to refit hotels as makeshift hospitals or centers for quarantine and treatment of those suffering from mild symptoms.
Another mission is to help the elderly, needy, and at-risk populations.
IDF soldiers are going door to door, providing food, medicine, and any other services as an assistance needed to various parts of Israel, different low-income neighborhoods, and the elderly and people who need that assistance.
One of those soldiers is Sergeant Roni Corin in the Homefront Command's Search and Rescue Unit.
I think everyone's having a really hard time right now. And at the end of the day, we're the people who are here to help the people of Israel.
The IDF is providing both prepared meals and boxes of groceries to those in need.
Every house I've been to, everyone who comes up to us, everyone who opens the door is always happy to see us. I think it's an amazing thing to be doing, to be able to help these people who have it even harder during these times.
Corin says even though times are tough, that shouldn't stop people from reaching out.
There's a great opportunity in seeing the good in this and trying to help, because I feel like at the end of the day, even though we're socially distanced, we're here for one another. I think during these hard times, we shouldn't take social distancing ourselves and not wanting to help.
In addition to the humanitarian aid, the IDF has also stepped in to help the Israeli police enforce the lockdown. But Conrica says the IDF's first mission remains the same.
First, continue to defend the state of Israel. None of our enemies have dissolved, and they will continue to try to kill Israeli civilians the day after they finish reeling from the results of the virus. As such, we need to stand guard along our borders 24/7, and that is what we're doing, and that is priority number one.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Next on Faith Nation, the story of a pastor's wife, her imprisonment, and how she gained her freedom. That and more when we come back.
Daddy?
Yeah, buddy?
How many nickels are in a dollar?
There are 20 nickels in a dollar.
How do birds fly? Does milk really make my bones stronger?
Yeah.
Daddy, when we die, will we go to heaven?
Do you have the answer to life's biggest question? Call the 700 Club. We'll help you find answers to the important questions life brings your way.
Watch breaking news, in-depth exclusive stories and programs from health to entertainment you won't find anywhere else. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. Enjoy credible news reporting from around the world. Discover inspiring programs and stories of hope. all in one place from a Christian perspective. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. To watch the CBN News Channel, download the app or visit cbnnewschannel.com.
Hello, I'm Dr. David Perlmutter, board-certified neurologist and #1 New York Times bestselling author. Wouldn't it be great to boost your energy, eliminate brain fog, and even reverse brain disease? Well, you can, and I'm going to show you how, along with some of the world's most well-respected brain experts in this DVD, Protect Your Brain.
Get Protect Your Brain, a free DVD only from the Christian Broadcasting Network, featuring experts on the cutting edge of neuroscience and brain health.
No matter how many times you've failed in the past, you really can do this.
In Protect Your Brain, you'll discover simple strategies to keep your brain young and healthy. Improve your memory. Discover the gut-brain connection. In Protect Your Brain, get your free copy at cbn.com or call 1-800-700-7000.
If you want to improve the quality of your life, get the DVD Protect Your Brain and get it today.
A Christian mother in Cuba in prison for homeschooling her children has been released. Great news for her family, but her husband, a pastor, remains behind bars. Senior Washington correspondent Jennifer Wishon joins us with more on this case of religious persecution.
The Cuban government is notorious for threatening, detaining, and even perpetrating violence against religious leaders. Pastor Ramon Regal and his wife, Ida Exposito, were caught up in that persecution. Anarima Bargava with the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom joins me with details. First, tell us, what was it that landed Ida and her husband in prison?
They were both placed in prison. The pastor actually for the second time, for trying to homeschool their children in accordance with their faith. And they were charged with crimes against the law that requires everyone to register their religious activities with the Cuban government, and then suggests that not having your child educated within Cuban schools is somehow in and of itself a crime that you can be placed in prison for. And Ida actually was in prison for a year and was just released, and her children have been at home without their parents for that year, and obviously not having schooling at home during that time as well.
Ida was released before the end of her 18-month sentence. What does that signal to you?
We hope that it indicates something that that is positive, which is that the Cuban government realizes that imprisoning a parent for deciding how to educate their child is not something that is in line with religious freedom and the importance of making sure that people are able to practice their faith in the way in which they and their families believe is important.
Pastor Regal remains in prison, serving a 2-year sentence. Give us a sense of what conditions he's facing and what is his risk for contracting COVID-19?
It's of concern right now, particularly as we see many instances of prisons being a place in which people are contracting the COVID virus, and where all of the conditions of not having places to make sure that you have a clean, hygienic, enough food to eat, all of those things are worries that I think we have in prison conditions around the world, and that's certainly true of Cuba as well. And to have people who are imprisoned because of their faith and their religious practice is something that is, of course, incredibly concerning at this time where we want people who don't pose a threat to their community or to their society to be home.
Is there any hope that he will be released early?
We can hope that he would be released early, and we would hope that others who are imprisoned right now for even covering the trial. So we have a journalist who's been imprisoned in Cuba, Roberto Jesus Quiñones Aces, was covering the trial of Pastor Regal and his wife, and he was imprisoned for the crime of disobedience. And so we hope that all of them are able to come home during this time, again, because they are not posing a threat to safety or to the community. And it is important that they're able to be home when there are such threats looming in prisons across the country in Cuba.
I know the Commission has been monitoring Cuba for many years. Has the government made any efforts to embrace religious freedom?
There was a new constitutional process which many religious leaders tried to engage in Cuba, and we hope as that process has created some new provisions around religion in Cuba, that we hope that this will be a moment where the government does embrace the ways in which people want to practice their faith.
Commissioner Bargava, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Paying it forward, why the TSA rushed in to help their fellow airport workers struggling to survive the outbreak. That story next.
I am Regent's first ROTC graduate student.
Meet the pastors who are preaching the gospel in a fresh, fearless way. I'm Roberto Torresadillo. Join me each week for Next Gen Voices and watch God transform a generation.
How'd you like to get a redo on your health, on your body, on your arteries, so you could have the energy you had 20 years ago? The great news is you can. I'm Dr. Mike Roizen, chair of the Wellness Institute at the Cleveland Clinic. I've written 4 New York Times bestsellers. But even better than having to read all that, you can listen to this DVD and watch it. Protect your heart? Yes, you can. Here's how.
Go to CBN.com or call 1-800-700-7000 for your free copy of Protect Your Heart. Let the medical experts show you their new discoveries on how to avoid heart disease and even reverse it. Easy steps to uncover the hidden dangers in your medicine cabinet, reduce stress, and get a complete do-over for your health. Call 1-800-700-7000. That's 1-800-700-7000. Or go to CBN.com to claim your free copy of Protect Your Heart.
Finally tonight, TSA agents at one of the nation's busiest airports are working to give back to those affected by the coronavirus pandemic. The TSA at Dulles International Airport set up a new food pantry to serve out-of-work airport personnel.
It feels great, especially right around Easter right now. It feels great to be able to give back to those people and have them a chance to feed their families in this hard time. We all have to come together as a family.
It's just fantastic to see the sense of charity, especially in this time when our nation is so divided. People are coming together.
The pantry is stocked with things like fruits and vegetables, non-perishables, and diapers. Dulles TSA says it's their way of giving back to their airport family who did the same thing for them during last year's government shutdown when many agents were working without pay. Well, they're paying it forward for sure. Well, good night and thanks for watching Faith Nation. We hope to see you back here tomorrow.